Boom. We are live. ZLS 027 and Philip Fulcher in the studio. Philip, awesome to have
Hey,
you, man.
everyone. I'm glad to be here. It's good to get on and talk.
Yeah, man. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into things? How we know each other? I'll let you explain.
Yeah, of course. So we're both employees at Narwhal. So I've been an Angular engineer for a while now. I think when I took my first training class in Angular, like Angular 4 dropped in the middle of that week-long training session that I had. So that was John Papa and Ward Bell and Dan Wallin when they were running the series of training classes. So I went through that. I came back, at that point, we were running like an Angular JS app, and I'd been sent out to this training for my company to Dream Team.
Dream Team!
So I was sent out to kind of figure out, okay, how do we get to the next
I'm realizing
version?
now. I thought Nicole was talking about you and me, Philip. She's probably talking about the John Papa and Dan Wallin and all them. They're probably more of a dream team.
No, Zach,
it's getting too big.
That's actually, it's you and me. No way. No way. Half of them, I think, like John Pop is definitely at Microsoft now. I think Dan Wallin maybe just. I won't speak out of turn, but there's a lot of folks at Microsoft.
Dan Wallin is in the Phoenix. I'm pretty sure. I think Jeff is friends with him.
Cool.
So I don't know. I haven't met him, but
yeah.
Nicole confirms we are the dream team, Philip. So
obviously, well, the dream team is really Narwhal, right? Like being at Narwhal is awesome.
We are a sub team of the dream team. There we go.
Yes. So I had this really great workshop, and I had come back to work like the next week. And I was kind of in charge of training everybody based on that to see how we could get from Angular JS to Angular. And that went from like training everybody to, okay, you're in charge of the Angular upgrade. Which was like, yeah. So it's like learning Angular is one thing, like upgrading Angular JS to Angular is like a whole other thing. And so we definitely hit like some roadblocks along the way. But it was huge for me.
Yeah, I remember. So I came into web development just as Angular 2 was launching, and I remember the one thing I was thinking is, okay, Angular 2 came out. I probably should learn like Angular 1, whatever that is. And I started exploring down that route, and everything I read was just, don't bother. Angular 2 is completely different, and of course it was. I didn't understand fully how much it was. Now I kind of do, getting my hands into Angular JS, but it was definitely an interesting thing to upgrade these projects. So
yeah, for sure. And I'd been doing Angular JS for like a few years there, at very different levels. I'd written some very small things, and the company I was at the time was like enterprise level software. And so Angular JS can be done in a lot of different ways. It's very, very simple to get into. I think the original example on the Angular JS homepage was, add this one line to your index.html and, you're good to go. Like, you can start using everything out of the box there. But eventually you get to a point where, okay, I don't want to like copy and paste another file URL into my index.html so that I can actually do this. So I've got to look into a build process. And there's a period of time where you either came in on Grunt or Gulp.
Yeah.
And then, Webpack came in fairly late in the process there, but, some folks did start using that. But by that point, we had a good build pipeline. There was no reason to reinvent the wheel. And so we were looking forward to Angular at that point, and we had enough headaches during Angular JS that we really, really wanted to solve in Angular. So that's where
Yeah.
a ton of my growth as a developer came in. Was okay, I've had enough of like one view modifying this variable that this other view was using. All these mutable variables getting passed around through like two-way binding.
It
And
sounds
so I knew I
terrible.
wanted. It was terrible. At the time, it's like, when we were first starting, we said this is magic. Like AngularJS is magic. There's nothing else that I would rather ever code with. And then you get to a point where you realize, oh no, I've made a huge mistake. Even going back and like debugging old AngularJS stuff, I'm seeing like there was a variable that would get passed around like three different components, but that variable was never actually defined anywhere. It was never in any of the controllers. It was never in JavaScript code. It strictly existed as like this little variable in the HTML template that would then get updated by all three components, and that was how those components communicated.
That's crazy.
And but I mean, it was cool. At one point, we thought, oh, you can just like pass this variable around and it'll update everywhere and change text and it'll take care of updating the DOM. We thought it was great until we had to debug it.
Yeah.
And then everything kind of fell apart. And so, coming into Angular, that was so appealing to me of like, okay, we're going to set some guardrails for you. Like there's a way to do things, and we're going to bake in a build process. We're going to bake in much better dependency injection so that you can handle that. And basically like set this thing up to scale better than AngularJS ever did. So that was a huge period of growth, and that I can basically like trace going to like that one workshop all all the way to like where I am at Narwhal right now. Speaking of which, so Brian Love was when he was working with Breebug, he was a contractor on our project when I was at this other company. And I was wearing a collar like every time I was in the office. Like I would not come into the office in anything less than like a collared shirt. It was just like my thing. I looked around the office. I saw everybody else being like super cash, and I said, absolutely not. I'll have a collar on, if not a blazer, and I will be the best dressed developer in here.
I feel so sad that I don't know that side of you, Philip. I've never.
Well, now work at home, Philip, and work at home, Philip has nowhere to wear a blazer too.
That's awesome. Yeah, we've got some. You're entertaining the masses.
So Brian was a huge influence on me. While we were working together on this huge project. Breebug was actually working for us on of a converting of all things like an Adobe Flash app to Angular. And so, there's no code sharing there. They're basically like just rewriting the app, but like figuring that all out.
Or like it was a Flash program?
It was a Flash program previously, and so they basically,
I hear Flash and I just think Homestar Runner. So
yeah.
Is it that kind of app, or is it something else?
No, everything that we worked on was was related to like water quality. And I will say, just by like saying Homestar Runner, you've dated us so hard. Like
I tried to show my kids Homestar Runner, and they're like, "Dad, what is this crap?"
It's exclusively for men in their 30s. Like if you were in college in the early to mid 2000s, you loved Homestar Runner, and now no one has any idea what you're talking about anymore.
Yeah. Nicole does.
Well, Nicole's with us. But yeah, Brian was a huge influence. He brought in like a ton of NGRX knowledge to the project that we were working on. I learned a ton from him. And honestly, like that's when I say it's great to work at Narwhal, it's because I know that there's a ton of people who are super smart, and I can learn from every single one of them. Actually, I will. My wife, it drives my wife crazy because every time she says something and I want to be a smartass, I end up saying something like, "I don't know what that means. You smell like pea soup." And she didn't watch Homestar Runner in college either, so it's just for me. And yeah, so Teen Girl Squad comes up too.
Teen Girl Squad. I got you the voice right. But man, that was great. Arrowed. I don't know all the clips. I was pretty cash as Homestar Runner, but like what was it? Trogdor. Trogdor was my jam.
Trogdor the Burninator. I never remember, like, I remember everything out of context. Like, I do remember an episode of Teen Girl Squad where they got crushed by like a wave of babies. Like a wave of babies came out of nowhere and crushed them. There's a time they got assaulted by possums. This is the content people came to hear. Like, I know it. Like, I feel it in my bones. They wanted to hear people reminisce about Homestar Runner and those good old Flash days.
Those good old Flash days. So this was a serious application with Flash. Let's try to get back on target. And we had and Brian Love was contracting with you to try to get this migrated over to Angular. So
yeah, so he was like, I was working on sort of like this the platform project, and he actually came in with Breebug, and Brian's a great engineer. All the engineers at Breebug are great. We had a great experience working with them. And so they were working on sort of it was a different project than ours. But at that point we were looking into, okay, so we definitely have like this, we have this other project with the Flash conversion. We know that we're going to have a ton of teams working. And one of the problems that we had with AngularJS before was when we did components and we did separate views, we put everything in separate repos. Anyway, and they would get like packaged up and then uploaded to, we weren't using Artifactory. It was something based off of NuGet, actually. So we were working off of that, but it was basically like our own internal Bower system. Okay. So we would upload things there, and we like very quickly got into these scenarios where it's like, okay, these 5 different views are importing different versions of the button. What do we do? And so I knew we had that trouble like very early on, and so we chose NX pretty quickly after NX came out. Nice. I think we were within like the first few months of the full release. So that was awesome. Like that was a whole game changer for us. And honestly, that is part of the reason that I wanted to go to Narwhal and work with everyone so much. Because I really like the tool. I respected everybody there. There's the like Angular architecture book that Narwhal put out, like that for like a period of time. Like that was my Bible. Like anytime anyone like asked me a question like, where should this go in where should this go, I would like pull up the PDF and like flip through and like, okay, Victor Sapkin says we should put it here and we should name it this and we should tag it with this. Yeah, that it's an incredible resource, and even if it is a little out of date now, out of date based on like the tooling, like the commands for NX aren't quite the same. The Angular console doesn't actually exist anymore, and there are screenshots there. The dependency graph looked completely different back then.
Yes. The dependency graph's gone through a few changes. There's a time where it was in the its main form was in the NX plugin for VS Code, and it looked completely different, like with the little strips going everywhere. I actually kind of like that one, but
we should bring it back.
I like yours. I like yours better. Yours is the one that you've done with just the extra features on that makes it super awesome. But we'll get to that later. Let's not jump the gun.
For sure. Yeah.
But yeah, it's super interesting to hear you talk about that. I think we've had this conversation in private before, but I had the same exact, maybe not the same exact experience with you coming into NX. It was like we were creating custom solutions, and we would just need GUIs. And I was just kind of like the GUI guy. And somehow I worked my way into that position, and we'd got to the point where we had done a few of them in Angular, and it was just like, man, we just keep reusing this stuff. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just put it somewhere? And we didn't want to mess with the whole, I don't know, publishing to somewhere. Like part of the great thing about Angular 2 was I didn't have to mess with the Grunt or Bower or Webpack or anything. Just hit that ng serve, hit that ng build. That's all you need.
Yep.
And
I skipped like right over Webpack, but there was I was writing an article for the Nrwlian blog a few months back on how to run AngularJS inside of an NX workspace, and I got to the point where I realized, oh no, I have to build it with Webpack. And now I have to figure out Webpack. Like I couldn't like avoid
you almost
it anymore. Now, luckily, someone else had figured out everything to build AngularJS with Webpack. I could go into the repo, copy paste. I'm good to go. That's what being a senior developer is like. It's knowing which code to copy and paste. Like Webpack config. Oh yeah. Copy, paste. No problem.
Awesome. Well. But yeah, so we started talking about depth graph. Let's maybe go into that a little bit more.
Let's talk about it.
So I know for me, before coming to Nrwlian, depth graph was like one of the biggest things about NX that I loved. Obviously being able to reuse stuff was like probably the main feature. Easily reuse stuff. Let me qualify that. But being able to sit down with a team of developers and say, what are the features we want to do? Which package do they belong into? How should this depth graph look? I really, having those conversations, I felt like they really set us up for success, as opposed to, I think, from what I see with other people using NX, it's more, well, either the depth graph is completely unused, or it's like there's not much thought given to it. It's kind of like the result of some choices that happen to have been made, and well, let's just see where the depth graph's at. So I don't know if you've had similar experience or similar ideas about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like previously when I was using NX, like I brought up the depth graph a few times, and mine looked like a rat's nest. Like it was all together, and like I got like really scared. I turned it off, like shut my laptop. Like, oh no, everything's terrible. I'll have to figure this out.
Shut it down.
Shut it down. I can't look at this anymore. This is stressing me out to look at this. And because you always have, if you're not keeping an eye on your dependency graph, I promise you that you will be surprised when you bring it up, because you're going to have like this mental model of, okay, these features should probably depend on this and this, and you have an idea in your head of what your dependency graph looks like and what things are interrelated. And if you make a change down here, okay, it'll probably like filter up through these couple things, but it's not a big deal. The depth graph is your way to ground those assumptions and to make sure that you actually know. Because especially if you haven't put in any dependency constraints using tags in NX, then you're going to have a lot of trouble of like being able to catch when someone like depends on something that they shouldn't be. That was absolutely how I felt. Like I knew we had a problem because this depth graph was terrible, and there were like, no paths.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. A terrible depth graph. Unfortunately, I think, and this is just like a limitation of how difficult a problem is. I think a well formulated depth graph and a like haphazard depth graph are kind of hard to decipher. Like they both kind of look like rat's nests a little bit, but you got kind of like train yourself to know. Kind of like what you were saying. It's like you want to affect one, make sure the things being affected, the things that show up red are the ones you want to show up red. So
yeah, for sure.
I've got so prior to starting interviewing all these guests, I was doing like the live coding stuff. So I've got that depth graph up. Do you want to take a look at that together?
Let's take a look at it. Yeah, I was
Let's
bringing
do
this
it.
up and taking a look earlier.
Cool. Let me hide this overlay. So this is everything right here.
It's everything.
I don't know. Can
yeah.
you? I feel like we'd probably have to zoom in on maybe one project or something.
Yeah, I can't read anything on it, but I can tell you that even if you're looking at this, like even on, I mean, this is a small project. Like this is, you've done a lot of work here, but this is still really, really small, given what we often see in NX workspaces. And so, we're already starting to see things like, if I look at the entire depth graph, then I can't actually tell what's going on here. Like this is kind of madness. And so a lot of times, and this used to be the default actually, like just until
well, not just the default. This was like the only option for a long time, right?
So. Yeah, there was a long time where it's like you ran depth graph and you actually got like a PNG that looked like this, and you're like, oh no, what's going on here? And so like even I didn't use the depth graph very much because that's kind of the state it was in. By the time I got to Nrwlian, and this was like just in January, we had kind of evolved into something in the browser that gave you like the search boxes that you could include and exclude, but it still kind of rendered everything by default, and then you could start working with it. And then it was like my first project on NX. That Victor asked me to take care of was, hey, why don't you make the depth graph better? And I was like, ugh, okay.
Well, you did an amazing job, I think. But yeah.
Well, thank you. I really, really appreciate that. And it was through some feedback sessions with Victor and Jason Jean. I was shouting Jason Jean out in the office hours this week too. So he's great. But going through like some iterative like feedback loops with those two got it to the stage that it is. So collaboration is the name of the day. I wouldn't have been able to get to this point by myself. And in fact, like there's still a lot of code in there from like what Victor, initially put out for this depth graph. So we're always standing on the shoulders of giants.
Absolutely.
So I will take credit that it looks pretty good right now. But nothing is ever all about me. It's definitely thanks to my teammates and my colleagues, and even being able to get the opportunity to do this. Thank you very much. That's awesome. So.
I'm sorry, Philip. I don't mean to make you uncomfortable by heaping praise on you, but you're handling it like a champ.
I'll throw it all back. I'll throw it all back.
There you go.
If I'm good, it's only because I have a good team. That's something that I find is like really, really important. Like technology is great as a developer, but like anytime you start to make it about yourself or like think that you did something on your own, that's where we get into trouble. That's where we get into, like you can't make good software that way. Like software is inherently collaborative, inherently empathetic. You have to be thinking about your users. You have to be thinking about your teammates. You have to be thinking about, other stakeholders within the organization who are, about this software. You can't, you could build software like by yourself for yourself. And like, what's the point? What's the point if you're not interfacing and like collaborating with other folks?
Yeah, well, that's the power of like the field we're in, right? Like, I don't know if you were here when Victor shared this in our Slack. It was this DHH talk, the guy from Ruby on Rails, and he was just talking about this concept of the commons, and we're in this like pivotal point in human history right now where through open source software we're kind of able to put stuff into the commons and take stuff out without depleting them, which is like this massively, it's this crazy place to be in, just as I don't know, as the human race right now. And it's like you said, it's all about empathy. It's all about trying to get that, trying to get tools you build to share it out with the greater community. So
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, man, do you want? Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I was just going to say, do you want to walk us through some of the newer features of the depth graph now that we've got this up? I am running affected, but I don't have any changes yet. But we could maybe do some of that if we want.
So I think the first thing that we can do to kind of clean this up, and this has been a feature since the beginning of the year, but if you go up and click on like group by folder up at the top left, this is like my number one go-to of like, I don't understand what's happening here. Let me group by folder. So group by folder is great because it's going to give you at least like some level of hierarchy between these couple things where you can see, okay, these are clearly like my front end libraries. These are my back end libraries. And then I have some things that are kind of floating out there. And I think this is where you can begin to make decisions based on the dep graph of, okay, I've got like some of these common utilities that are just kind of like floating around on their own. Is this the moment where I start to group those together? Do they go together? Is there some sort of like shared space that I'm missing? And even within like your front end directory there, like
let me just show the file graph here. I think this is big enough. The way I've got my folder structured, let me make that a little bit bigger. The apps are all in the one directory here. Let me pull this all the way out. And if I collapse that, you'll see my libs are organized into, my utils are kind of all the way on the front, on the top layer. I was considering whether to group these together in a directory as well. But then all my backend modules are here within this directory. And all the front end modules are here in this directory. And that's how I was able to put this blue box on stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and so this is actually this that group by folder is also like, it'll go down multiple levels. So if you were to separate some of your front end libraries into another directory inside of front end, like it would show you another box inside of there to sort of separate out the libraries from everything else that's in there.
So I was considering also, as we had said kind of before we started here, like doing some grouping or some folder structure by scope. So let me zoom in on here a little bit more. It's almost like there's a couple different dimensions of this, which is weird. I have this concept of content posts. That's maybe one scope, kind of. Friends is kind of another, but that's closely related to auth and users. And and I have forms over here. Forms is kind of interesting because they're specifically dumb, by which I just mean they don't have like a scope. There may be, I don't know if that would be like a core or utility based scope. But then on the backend side, those same scopes pretty much exist. The same ones, and they have like, there's an extra Mongo thing here just to wrap up Mongo just a little bit. So yeah,
that's very cool.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you saying that. So the book you were talking about, that was like the PDFs that you were going to do this on. I'm trying to figure out which one that was. I know Nitin did one that kind of prescribed scopes, data utils and stuff like that. There's the data util. It was like every feature, I think the way you put it, would have a feature. It would have like a wrapper or to kind of combine all these things in it, and then a data access and a potentially utils and potentially UI lib. I always struggled. I actually struggled looking at that PDF. I didn't quite like it. One of the things it prescribed. That's kind of why I went this way. Just doing front end and back end. I don't love this either. Like I said, it feels like content posts, and like this content post, the back end one and the front end one should kind of, it should reflect that these are related. Like these are kind of coupled, these two things, and you can in no way tell unless you like go zoom all the way out and you see, okay, I guess at the end of the day we're going to run our end-to-end tests if we change either one of these. So at least we'll catch things there. But yeah.
So it looks like so content post utils, like that library, it looks like it's dependent on by those couple of things. If we look at back-end post, content posts, and front-end content posts, and then there's content post utils. So like what's in your content post utils library?
Let's take a look. I believe it's pretty much just interfaces and functions. So I'm showing all my stuff here now. Where did that VS Code go?
Man.
I don't think there's anything
super get a calculator out.
I'm only human.
Oh.
I know it's disappointing to find out, but all right. So here's my content post utils, and yeah, right now I just have the one file, so it's not even that big of a thing. Let me break this down.
This is really interesting because like these are your models, right? And so if we go by so I'll say like the book, I think if you hit index.dev, I'm sure it's somewhere in there. I'm sure like Amanda is very disappointed that I cannot figure out this URL on stream so that I can get folks like go sign up and get our book. But so we have our let's find this. It was at maybe it's an Index Playbook. Is that something?
I know. So I know if you go to Narwhal Connect, or I think it's connect.narwhal. Or was it narwhal.connect? There.
It's part of Narwhal Connect.
Yeah.
For sure. It's the Enterprise Angular monorepo patterns. I think that was with Nitin and Victor co-wrote that.
Yeah, let me walk us through so at least people can know where to find this. Because I think it's free, right?
It is free. Well, you have to pay with your email address. So you have to sign up for Narwhal Connect. It's a free account. And then you can log in here and get the books and get the cookbooks as well.
Right. So if we go to books, here we go. So these are all, I think, free books from Narwhal. And then here's the one we're talking about. It's got the nice reader in here.
Yep.
So I don't think Jeff did that. But yeah, I remember it being all prescriptive, and this is the older version of the depth graph here. But, yeah, super cool resource.
So I really like this, and let's get another link out here for folks to review. Manfred Steyer has a book called Enterprise Angular, which I read, and this one is at, well, it used to be at LeanPub, and there's a notification there that it's over at angulararchitects.io.
I'm following you like a half step behind.
And it's sometimes hard to navigate only because sometimes it switches between like English and German.
Yeah, don't worry. Google Translate for the win.
So Manfred Steyer's book, Enterprise Angular, is also really, really good. And he is a huge proponent of domain-driven design. And there is a lot of really, really good work. I finally found it. There we go. There's a ton of really, really good work in this book. It's for free. Same thing as with Narwhal Connect. You punch in your email address, and suddenly you've got like this really, really great resource.
Yeah.
So he goes into the book from Narwhal, and what can make it a little hard to parse is it's really, really succinct. Like it's a lot of do this, do that. Here's the other thing, and I'm off. It's really, really terse. It's really to the point. It does not expound on a lot of things.
Right.
Manfred's book takes a little bit more time to sort of like linger in the details and figure out, okay, what is a domain? What does it mean to have like a feature library? I think I read this last year. I think this was my vacation book. Like that's what I do on vacation is kick back with like a nice Angular manual. But it's really, really good. Folks should check that out, especially if they found that they were a little put off by some of the approaches described in this book from Narwhal. But actually, you've got a great page pulled up there where we have the types of libraries. So when we're talking about like types of libraries, we have feature libraries, and so feature libraries are going to be things that contain actual logic. I think it says implement smart UI. So things like containers. Typically, these feature libraries are going to consume a lot of other libraries. Like you'll probably have like some UI libraries, and those are typically dumb components or presentational components, depending on which word you want to use there. Let's tend towards presentational components. Dumb is kind of mean, right?
I know. I feel bad every time I say it.
But, yeah, so let's stick with
better.
presentational components. You and me, we're going to stick with presentational components from now on. So presentational components, they only have inputs. They typically don't have services injected. And then your feature libraries are going to consume those, and they will be put inside of containers, which actually do know how to go out to get services. A lot of those services will come from data access libraries or state libraries. You can. This is prescribing like data access. I've also seen it like state libraries, and especially if you're using some sort of state manager, then state makes a lot of sense there. But these are going to be libraries that actually interface with the backend and contain that logic for interfacing with the backend. Those in turn are probably going to have libraries that sometimes you just need like a function that is really easy. It's something that like sorts something in a really specific way according to like your business logic, and it's a very often like pure functions, things that are just I don't have anywhere to like specifically put this, but I use it all over the place. So that's going to be things like utility libraries. The other thing that I will put on top of this is like a models library, because I think models are really, really important. And to be able to specifically say like these are my models, and when you're looking at the depth graph and you can tell which libraries are sharing models, I think that's really, really important. And I think calling that out is appropriate. So like when we looked at your depth graph, like that was kind of what I keyed off of like, okay, it doesn't look like these two things are related, but I could tell that things were related through the model.
Right.
And I think especially when you're talking about like front end and back end, like that's a really important connection point. And I think that's where you can start to see like surprises of if you haven't put constraints on your graph. Let's say that you have, it's not uncommon to have multiple models that may represent, maybe the same database entry. This view needs a slightly different model, or this view has like an enhanced model that actually pulls down some extra information or combines it with things.
Yeah.
And so you can begin to see things there of like, well hang on.
Let me pause you on that one for a second, because I'm curious about this, because I kind of go back and forth on this. So my utils here, it's pretty much my models. I think there's maybe some pure functions, kind of like some monads based on those models as well in here potentially. I don't actually know, but supposing there was an interface that was only being used in the front end, or maybe there's some like intermediary interface for a content post that I might use in the back end that's like, more Mongo driven. Would you feel weird about putting that model into a library, or would you think that, for your preference, do you prefer to have that down in the models at the bottom?
I think if it's an actual shared model that can be used by multiple libraries, I think it should be in its own library. And that's not like a hard and set rule. And I'll say that like none of this is like hard and set, that you absolutely have to model your libraries like this, or you're wrong. And Philip's going to come through the internet and get you.
Philip's coming for you.
I'm coming for you if you don't put your models in their own library. But that said, I think knowing which libraries share a data model it's important. And so like the things that you're talking about of, let's take like a concrete example of having like a Mongo model.
Yeah.
That may not be something that you want to share outside of the backend library that actually interfaces with that, because typically, not all the time, but I would say typically your database model that you're going to put into Mongo is not a one-to-one with what your API exposes to the front end.
Right.
Is that, I don't think that's controversial. I think so. Your database model should be what's good for your database. Your API should expose a model that's not good for databases. It's good for people. It's good for like people to program against, which is not necessarily the same thing as what's good for a database.
Right.
And so that Mongo model that you have, if you don't want it exposed to other libraries, or you want to do something where you don't want your front end to ever know what that Mongo model is. You shouldn't know about that Mongo model. You should only ever know about the API model. I think that's where you can start to like use the dependency constraints. And so you can say, with the dependency constraints, and for folks who don't know about the dependency constraints, that's more documentation that's up on nx.dev. But if you see the little tags area, in the block when you're hovering over a lib like this, Zach doesn't have any, but we could.
I'm a bad developer. We did add tags here. Do you want to see if we can live code some tags? That could be fun.
Let's do it. So we can get into some tags, because tags also so when you add a new library to your NX library, to your NX workspace, you're going to get this added to your nx.json.
Yep.
And right now it's just like the tags array.
The only thing I've done is I've touched the implicit dependencies a little bit, so my end-to-end test will have implicit dependencies on both the client and the API. So aside from that, this is all just what the schematic spit out. So this is if you haven't touched your tags, this is what it'll look like.
So this is a place where we could begin to do things like, so you've got front end like front end and back end in the name of all the libraries. And I think that's great. The other thing that you could do is actually tag these with like, I wouldn't go with type, but I would go with like
domain.
Oh no,
would domain be the right word?
It's not even it's not domain. But there's definitely like if anyone in the chat has any good name for like distinguishing between front end and back end, we could start to call it something like scope, but I don't even like that because I like using scope in like a really particular way. So like distinguishing back end from front end. We could
maybe if we could page through the book real quick. I think it has, the book prescribes a certain number of tags, right?
It does, yes. I don't think it accounts for, if I remember the many, many times I paged through this, I don't remember anything about front end versus back end. Okay. But let's just go with, we don't have to make this perfect. Let's not let perfect get in the way of making some progress here. So inside the tags, we could just go with like a front end tag. Like, we could tag everything that uses the front end and just tag it front end. And we could tag another one, all the other ones like back end, if they only use the back end API or only are concerned with the back end API.
But what would we give to like one of the utils that's meant to be shared across both?
I think that's where things are really, really interesting. We could call that shared. We could make a distinction between like front end, back end, and shared. And to sort of go back to my example that maybe we could get back to of like API models, stuff that you actually expose to your front end. That's something that can go into shared. And so you can have a constraint that says front end and back end libraries can depend on shared, but front end and back end libraries can't depend on each other.
Right.
And so that's how you can avoid things like the like front end depending directly on a Mongo model or something like that.
Right. Let's take a look. How would we define that? I know we've got some documentation on that.
Yeah.
Search.
Hey, this is another opportunity to say the search on nx.dev is so much better than it's ever been. It's awesome. It came in like a few months ago. I think Ben did that.
Yep, and we're using Algolia. It's amazing.
Ben is awesome. That search is awesome. Make sure that if you never used the search before because it didn't work very well, go back and use it now because it's really, really good.
So Philip, I did the original search.
Oh no!
It's okay. It was not very smart. It was not very smart. It was just going off of the. It was doing string matching on MD files. So now we've got something smart. But so I will gladly embrace anything like this.
Oh no! Yeah, you got to put up.
So but yeah, so I've got the tags up. Okay, so now we can define our side of our NX enforce module boundaries. And this is actually in the TSLint file. We're going to want to do this. Okay.
It is, yeah. We use TSLint so that we can throw up warnings or errors for you when you're actually developing. So if you try to import something from a library where you're not allowed to, it's going to throw it up.
Right. Let's jump into our TSLints. This is the right one. And do I not have any yet? I don't think I have any yet.
I didn't see any earlier. They're at like the very bottom of the page. I think your rules are collapsed right now.
Oh, here it is.
There we go.
Okay.
So that NX enforce module boundaries.
I like this one. This one looks very solid.
So this is what we start you out with, because it would be silly for us to start enforcing boundaries if you haven't set any. So this is what it comes in as default. But I will say that like once you start like defining these, you've kind of got to like buy in, because you'll start to get errors like libraries without tags can't depend on anything, and so you have to make sure that like everything is tagged. But we can begin to work on this. So if we do, real quick, like one of the things that we've been talking about, like a source tag of front end, we can say that it can only depend on libs that have a tag of front end or shared.
Yeah.
And then if we just like copy this and then paste it and replace front end with back end.
Oh, let me get my commas. There you go. Multi-cursor. Be impressed stream.
Yeah. I'm very impressed.
Thanks.
Every time I see someone use it like a multi-cursor, I'm like, I should use that.
I've got an interesting story about this. I don't know if Victor remembers this at all, but when I was doing the code interview with Victor, when I was coming on to Narwhal, I was trying to be very impressive and do like this thing with multi-cursor, and I absolutely fell on my face. I was like, I forgot to keep hiding. I felt so ashamed of myself.
No. Can we talk about code interviews with Victor? Because I've never been more intimidated in my life than going in.
It was very intimidating for me. I had a lot of respect for Victor before that moment. Probably have more respect for him now. But yeah, I kind of fanboyed in front of him too for like 15 minutes.
100%.
I could tell he was really annoyed. I was just like, oh no, what did I do?
I was flipping through, like I said, like the book from Ian Nitin was like my Bible for a while, and there was definitely a point where I had like people in my life saying, Philip, you can't do everything Victor Savkin says. Like, you're gonna have to think for yourself. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Go read the book. Like, the book is great. We just have to do everything the way Victor Savkin says. And so like going into an interview with him, I was like, oh no, and then he started asking me like really hard questions, and I thought going in that it was like, okay, obviously they asked me to come in for this interview. They know that I'm not a complete dummy, but also I have no idea what to expect.
Yeah, that's super interesting to hear you say that, because I definitely was in that school. Like, I felt like where I was coming from before was kind of like obscure, and I was the stuff we were doing on my team, I was like throwing stuff against the wall and see what sticked. Like, I thought I was like, I don't know, I think my stuff's good. It seems to work all right, but to go in front of Victor and like be tested, that was kind of like a defining moment. So,
and I will reiterate for the entire world, Victor is like the nicest guy in the entire world. Like, he never like made me feel pressured. And in fact, he like did an incredible job of helping me through the problems, because there was like not a one that I could actually walk through all by myself. I would like get to a point and then I'd be like, I don't know. And then he would like push me through. And so like, it's like, I feel like that's a good technical interview, when the interviewers don't just like stare at you until you come up with the solution. Like, it's always like a collaboration. So he did a really great job there. That doesn't detract from the fact that like the first question he asked me was about like Webpack and bundling code, and like I said, I skipped Webpack, and now I'm not going to get this job because I don't know what I'm doing. But I did. Yeah. Not at first. That's my other secret, is I got turned down the first time I interviewed with Narwhal.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, it's not something that anyone like really brags about, of like, I got shut down after my first interview. But so like Victor came back and had said, hey, you interviewed really well, but we're just looking for someone with a little bit more experience. We'll keep you in mind if any other positions open up. Gotcha. And 100%, I thought he was just like he and Jeff both were just like being nice. Like that's how you let someone down gently. Like, we'll call you back if there are any openings. Listen, a lot of people have told me that they would call back if there were any openings. I ain't never heard from these people again.
Narwhal folk are pretty genuine. That's one thing I really appreciate about it.
They were, because like just a couple months later, I got a surprise email out of the blue from Jeff saying, "Hey, why don't you come work for us? Actually, we do have a position open for you that would suit your skill set." I'm like, "Oh, they weren't kidding. They weren't kidding.
They weren't kidding. We don't kid at Narwhal."
So that was a nice aside. But yeah, so now that you have this in place, once you have like all your front end and back end libraries tagged, then you're going to be able to say, okay, if I have my Mongo models, and your Mongo models could be a part of like a models library, or they could be part of something that's like just like inside of your database access library. But you can at least begin to say things like, don't anyone come depend on my Mongo models.
Absolutely.
So especially if you if you want to share like Mongo models between a couple of different backend libraries, that's something cool that you can do now. And you don't have to worry so much about like, what am I exposing from this library? Who can actually use it?
Well, it's a great way of like we were talking about before, like planning out this this depth graph and what it should look like. It's a great way of defining those rules programmatically. So like the tools can do that for us. So we can just kind of decide this is how we want the depth graph to flow, and the tags will make sure we never violate those.
For sure,
which I think is awesome. So otherwise, you're just like relying on people to be disciplined, and that's always a bet you'll lose. So
you can't rely on developers to ever be disciplined.
Well, yes, people in general. I think some people are remarkably disciplined, but it's a bet you lose on. It's a losing bet. So
it's like you're basically starting to like, and you insert yourself into a competition anytime you just expect developers to just be disciplined. Like anytime that you like just say, well, we won't do it through automated tooling. We'll just ask the developers to be disciplined. You're setting yourself up for like, it's the end of the sprint. We're supposed to like deploy this tomorrow. And if I follow Philip's dumb rule that he just asked me to be disciplined about, then I'm going to miss the deadline. And oops, I just depended on this library and I shouldn't have. Once you get enough of those, things start to go bad. So anything that you can enforce through automated tooling is definitely the way to go.
Machines are extremely good at discipline. It's something I've learned.
It's wild, yeah. If you have good software and it runs the same way every single time, then you'll be good.
Yeah.
But yes, this the comment in the chat. I need automation to save me from myself. Is awesome. Thank you, Nicole. I need automation to save me from myself too. And I, these are the tools you can kind of put in place to like, it's discipline is really hard. And that's something that we see all over, whether it's like programming, exercising, eating right, not scrolling through Twitter instead of going to bed. None of these are real examples from my own life. But that's really hard. Anything you can do to kind of like pave that way of you don't need, you don't have to have discipline. You just like, it's done. There's no option except to do it this way. Or we're going to make it really, really hard for you to do it this way. So this is how we can automate things. The other thing that I wanted to point out, and we're coming up on time here, but one of the newest things we've added is that search box, and I wanted to show folks like how you can use that. So unfocus your constant post utils so that we don't have that anymore.
Okay.
So we've got nothing here. One of the things that we can do is, again, like looking at the entire depth graph is really, really difficult. But one thing we could do is you have front end in the name of all your libraries, which is awesome. So if you just type in like front end here and then do a filter,
Oh.
then so this is a really easy thing to understand. And so you can kind of look at your depth graph in like sort of different levels of hierarchy almost. Of if I
Cool.
just if I'm working on the front end and that's all I care about right now, and I want to start to make some decisions, this is a pretty easy depth graph to understand. It doesn't have quite as much information. The mistake you have to avoid is like, this is now no longer the full picture.
Right.
Um, don't go in, don't like use this view and suddenly make the mistake of, okay, front end content posts only depends on front end rscircle ngrx utils. It definitely depends on other things. And so if we actually check the include projects in path that are right below that and then filter, this is also going to include anything that has the word front end in it or is in the dependency graph for anything else that was found.
Okay.
And so this will start to give you a little bit better picture of, okay, now I understand that front end content posts depends on a little bit more than what I saw before. There are some things outside of my current scope that I am depending on and can kind of give you that picture. And it's sort of like if you do front end content posts and actually focus it, that's sort of like I'm really, really interested in everything happening to this library and where it gets depended on. So
Right.
this will give you, the sort of the final word on what kind of dependency chain is this thing in.
Yeah.
So I think those are all really, really useful. I think the dependency constraints are really important. I can tell
Yeah.
you
Maybe
that
maybe real quick, could we describe,
uh,
so we had the front end, back end, and shared now. So that's kind of one dimension.
yep.
What are some other common dimensions we would see?
So some other common dimensions that we'll see are if you so we talked about like the type of library, and there's sort of like 4 or 5 different types of library where it's like feature, models, util, data access, and you can enforce constraints there of a feature library can depend on like utils and models and data access. But then you can go down to like your data access and say data access can only depend on models and utils. So when you're doing that,
And
you
maybe
don't
other data access, maybe? I don't know.
maybe
Maybe.
yeah that's really really interesting, and you
Things
have to
get
start
weird
asking
in there. But yeah.
things definitely get weird, and I think that's where you begin to ask yourself, especially with like your data access libraries, very often being ngrx, of what do you actually want to expose outside of that state.
Right.
Because if you just like launch all if you throw all of your actions, so do you use facades to manage access to your ngrx state?
Yeah.
Um, in that case, you probably
We're
don't
getting
want to
pretty spicy
expose your
here.
actions.
Brandon's
We're getting
watching,
a little
remember.
spicy. If you use a facade, you might not want to expose your actions from the library, because you don't actually want anyone to be able to call those actions. But yeah, I mean, like that dependency on like other data access libraries is a really interesting question, and it even gets back to like, do you actually need to depend on any like code that's inside that other data access library, or do you really just need the model?
Hmm.
And that's where I think it's like really, really beneficial
Right.
to. I like that models library, so that like 2 data access libraries might depend on the same model, or maybe even like a shared util. But it
Hmm.
starts to get a little weird when like why does this one service that hits this one API need anything else from another library. That might be, especially from like another data access library, like that starts to look like mixed concerns to me.
Well, there's
And
a whole concern of like circular dependencies with that too, where
yes.
if you have, especially with NGRX, if you kind of do the way I think we prescribe in that book, you have actions, selectors, reducer, and effects all in the one lib. The way I've actually broken this out in my project, this front end content post, I think this would best translate to a feature lib, but there's also the NGRX stuff in there, but only the things I determine are private parts of the NGRX. So what I mean by that is pretty much the effects and the reducer. All the actions and all the selectors are actually in this one common library at the bottom of this specific app. So the front end RCircle NGRX utils, this has all my actions and all my selectors for anything for this one app up here. Okay. So this is a constraint I could apply to it. I could say anything that depends on like this specific one, maybe I could give this its own tag, needs to belong to the RCircle web client app, which maybe I could do with another tag. And that way, so that way I'm kind of letting the public stuff get out. So any lib could potentially use like the action or the selector without necessarily having to know about what's going to happen with when that action gets dispatched or So I kind of like that pattern. I'm still I don't know, I'm still filling it out. There's stuff to like about it. I think it's maybe a little out there though. We'll see. I
think it's really, really interesting. I am I'm a fan of facades. You can take them or leave them. You either like them or you don't. They are they're like another. They're more code. They are more code. Like we can't get around that. They are more code. They do encourage the reuse of actions. So you have to be careful about them.
Well, so the thing I like most about NGRX is if you put enough effort into your NGRX stuff and constructing it, it's like you inject the store, and sometimes that's it, and you just don't get there with facades. I feel like when you're dropping in the store, what you really are dropping in is an API that you've composed already that you're just bringing in the different pieces in via your selectors and your dispatches. When you're dropping in the facade, you've put some pretty harsh constraints already on one slice of state. And you're saying, here's that one slice of state, and you get everything with it and just kind of like have fun. And then you kind of got to like manage them all together as opposed to just like letting them work together. That seems to be that's my thing against facades. I think it kind of goes against some of the developer sugar that comes with NGRX. So I don't know. I don't know. It's not a hill I'll die on, but I like it.
No, absolutely not. If I came into a project and I said, what do you think about facades? And they said, we hate them.
Okay.
Cool. Let's move on. Let's get to work. Like it's not a hill I would die on. And even if folks started saying like we don't need state management, we could just use like a behavior subject on a service. Okay, you're gonna in that particular case you'll reinvent NGRX. I've tried it before. Any amount of complexity eventually results in you recreating NGRX very badly. But
it's interesting you bring that up. Aaron Frost is a big proponent of behavior subject in a service pattern. He actually likes it a lot, and I think we disagree on that point. He's brought up some points to me. One thing I may have neglected to say on my last stream when I had Mike Ryan on, big NGRX guy. I said that the behavior subject in a service it's imperative because you got to call some method to call that next. It's really the same thing in NGRX too, if you think about it. Like you're dispatching. That dispatch is imperative as well. I was talking with Mike about you could have maybe locked down that API to make it truly reactive. Like you don't get reducer functions, you get one observable stream, and you got to scan that yourself. And like that way you'd be like truly unimperative, but it would also be a mess. It would also be terrible UX or developer experience. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, these are the sort of spicy takes, and I laugh about them. It's like ha ha ha. But at the end of the day, I also feel like we're all just trying to get work done, and
Absolutely.
it's like if facades help you and you like facades, go and do facades. You can shoot yourself in the foot. You can also shoot yourself in the foot without facades. Can we be clear
Absolutely.
there? Like there's a lot of trouble you can get yourself into with NGRX or GraphQL or NGXS or anything. You can always get yourself into trouble. Be thoughtful. Don't choose
empathy everywhere. Yeah,
there it is. Always think about what your developers need, what they're going to benefit from. For a very long time, I will still push like learning RxJS as like an incredibly important part of Angular. But there was definitely a period in my career where I was like hard as nails on code reviews of like, you didn't get this pipeline right.
Brandon,
we're out here trying to spread the love, talk about empathy, and
Brandon drops the bomb.
Inject your spicy takes. You can have your spicy takes on your own show. This is the peace and love show.
I appreciate Brandon dumping the fire on this channel. It's always great. He always shows up near where we wrap up, but it's always awesome to have him show up and make you crack up. So, but yeah, when I had Brahm B-Man on, he's the guy who did like the NX Go plugin for us. It was like, mess around, do your philosophy. Have fun with the new stuff a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's getting stuff to work. It's being productive, and just like you were saying, if something makes you productive, but maybe it's a suboptimal developer experience in some way, that's okay. Like as long as you're getting stuff done, that's important.
I bet your users don't care if you use facades.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, that's what it's about, right?
This is a whole other thing. I got into this Twitter discussion with people about unit tests and how you like shouldn't use them. You should just use end-to-end tests. It's kind of a hot take on itself, but end-to-end tests, I think, put you in the mindset of a user as opposed to putting yourself in the mindset of a developer. That's one of the things I'm realizing about the argument I wanted to make with that. I think at the end of the day, that's the piece that matters. Like the unit tests are going to help you figure out maybe some bugs in your code. But I think at the end of the day, if your incentives are aligned correctly and you're trying to give your users a better experience, end-to-end tests are the way to go. Anyways, we're way over, Philip. I'm sorry to take you over.
That's all
Dude,
right.
you want to wrap up now? You want to keep going? It's balls in your court, buddy.
Let's wrap up so I can have dinner with my family.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for. Go ahead. Okay, I was just gonna say thank you so much for coming by. Thank you for doing awesome stuff with the depth graph, stuff that I can benefit from. You rock, Philip.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being my teammate. Thanks for coming on.
Zach, you rock. Thank you for being my teammate. Everybody at Narwhal is a comrade. I really love working here. You got folks at Narwhal like lining up to be on your show.
That's pretty awesome.
Anything that we do, like you see a line of people coming out to help you, and I'll say to everybody else, like I hope your organization is like that too. Like I hope everybody has an organization where they have people who have their back, who are ready to carry water with them. That's I think that's where you can be happy. And, you know, if I hope everybody is doing that for their colleagues. Like, everybody has bad days. Everybody can put their head on the desk, but, you know, at the end of the day, you got to be comrades. You got to be brothers and sisters in arms with everybody that you're working with, because, you know, what's the point otherwise?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Philip. Well, thanks, man. Tomorrow we've got Mike Hardington coming by to talk about Ionic. Super psyched for that. I hope to see y'all next time. I'm going to go ahead and rate us all over to B-Man because he just started streaming. So we'll send the chat over there as soon as we wrap up. Bye, y'all. Have a good one.
Bye.